Officially, now welcome everyone to our speaker session with Rosie Zhou from Columbia University in the city of New York. We're very excited to have Rosie here today to be our speaker, and she's going to be talking about some very important topics in film and reflections about her as a filmmaker. Make sure that I have no echo on YouTube. And yeah, so we're very excited to get started. So also I see in the chat, we have a lot of students from all around the world. So we have students from US, Italy, it's currently 2 a.m., Argentina, Botswana, also 2 a.m. currently. Hi from France, hi from Argentina, hi from Spain. Um, yeah, so we're going to be getting started from Poland. Yeah, Brazil, wonderful. Yes, we're excited to have a nice group here from Germany. Yeah, it's terrific. Okay, all right. So I'm going to share my screen and sorry about that, 1 second. I'll be sharing my screen here. And without further ado, I'm going to give it away to Rosie.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being with me today and listening to me give this presentation. I'm just so thrilled to be here, and it's really cool to hear that there's so many students from all around the world, places where it's already so late at night or early in the morning. I think it's so wonderful that this festival is able to bring together so many students from so many different parts of the world, and really have everyone in community and enjoying these wonderful student films together, and giving student filmmakers an opportunity to showcase their work. Coming from me, who is this short film, Forget Me Not, is really my first venture into filmmaking at all, and the first thing I've ever done with film. And so I'm just so grateful for having this opportunity and this platform to be able to share it and share kind of my reflections around this first experience, and try to connect it with just film in general, and the importance of representation and diversity in film. And so, yeah, just thank you all so much again for being here. Really excited for this. And so I think the first, just to share a little bit more about me and my background with making Forget Me Not. Mark, if you could move to the next slide. Yeah, so this first slide, I just kind of wanted to share some stills from my first short film, Forget Me Not. And this short film was really a product of my desire to just make something myself, despite having no experience at all. And I just kind of dove into the deep end, I like to say, and created this film that is very centered around themes of friendship and love, and kind of carrying on the legacies and spirits of our loved ones on, even after they have passed away. And I really wanted to be able to convey some feelings that me myself, as a second generation immigrant and Chinese American, have experienced just throughout the years of living in America. And yeah, so this, if you haven't watched it, the synopsis of the story is kind of that this girl named Jasmine, she is feeling increasingly distant from her grandmother in China, and she learns from her mom that her grandma is her memory is just becoming worse and worse. She's developing dementia, and so and because Jasmine has never been able to really interact with her that deeply before, because of the language barrier and her Chinese, just not being able to communicate with her grandma in Chinese. All those feelings of distance and kind of loss are becoming more and more prominent because of learning that her grandma's losing her memory. So and then she meets this girl named Ruth, who is on the left of the pictures that you see. And Ruth, it becomes sort of like the bridge between Jasmine and her grandma, because she pretends to be her over the phone when while calling Jasmine's grandma. So yeah, and really, I kind of the main theme, I guess, from all of this is just that if there are any of you out there who have always wanted to make something yourself and just like make a film, but don't really know like how to go about it, you feel like you don't really have the experience to do it, I would just say like just go for it, and everything else will kind of just fall into place after you have that initial desire and initial motivation to just do it. Because I think for me, like, yeah, really, like this at this point last year, I didn't even think that I would do anything like this. I really could not even think that I would make like a short film within the next year. But then I just kind of, said why not, and just went for it, and I'm very glad that I did. And Mark, if you can move to the next slide. There's just more background of my own. Like mentioned before, I'm currently a rising junior in college. And this is the first short film I made. I always had this dream of pursuing film when I was younger, but I just never really went for it again because I labeled it as sort of unrealistic and like unobtainable. Like why, how could I ever do something like that? And yeah, no, I think sometimes it's really like the barriers that we create within our own minds that stop us from doing things. And I think that was definitely the case for me. And so, yeah, again, I would just encourage any of you to just go for it and try to make something yourself if you've always had that desire. Because I found that it has led to a lot of meaning and significance for me through making this film. So yeah, and then if we can move to the next slide, this is kind of just moving into a lot more of the process itself of making a film, and I'm going to try to connect this to the kind of substance of my presentation a little later on, which is why it's important to have these stories from different communities shared, and we continue to have more and more authentic stories and authentic representation from communities that have historically not been authentically and well represented. So yeah, I think for me, like the story in Forget Me Not was really developed from a combination of, again, like I mentioned, my own personal experiences, being a second generation Chinese American, and kind of my own feelings connected with China and my grandparents in China, the increasing feeling of distance, which really was only exacerbated because of the pandemic. And just, yeah, I think the past few years have been challenging that way because of not being able to really connect with family all the way, in China. And I know that's definitely a very resonating sentiment with a lot of second generation Asian Americans, and also just anybody who's kind of in that space of in between like your home country versus maybe America or any other country that you're like studying in, or just like you're away from your roots, I guess, your home country. And so that was definitely a big part of it. And another part was working with the actresses, because I think through working with the actresses, I was able to learn a lot about kind of where they saw the most important themes and points that the film should touch on. And we definitely changed things as we went, and as we collaborated. And I really thought about, what was it that I wanted this film to be able to convey. And so that's why I'm really grateful for being able to work with others who really helped me, try to develop the story to the fullest, and really hone in on like what exactly we wanted to shape it to be. And yeah, and then along with that, just thinking very deeply about what the messages I wanted to convey were. I think an important note with this is I really wanted to have it be like just a very like authentic story. And I didn't really go into it thinking that I wanted to create a story that was like somehow like Asian American focused. But instead I just kind of wanted to make like what felt most personal to me and what I understood the most. And I think that's a really important kind of facet to recognize, is that because film is such a it's such a medium that connects so deeply to the filmmaker themselves, and you really have to think about, like, as a writer, as a director, yeah, like how do you want to shape the story, and what is it that you really want your audience to take from this, and connecting to if you can move to the next slide, just representation in general. I think that is really why representation is so important in film, because we're able to tell best the stories that are most personal to us, that touch on our lived experiences and our identities, and ways of navigating the world will inevitably shape the stories that we desire to tell and how we tell those stories. And so, thinking about why, like, having more and more people who actually understand these experiences to be able to share their stories and have their stories be spotlighted. I think that is why representation in film is so important. And yeah, I think, coming from me, who, again, this was like a very new kind of thing to dive into, I really just think that it's important to have that lived experience, and to be able to have, people who actually have gone through the experiences of living through certain things, and living through, sorry, there's a phone message in the background, but so it's important to note that importance of your personal story in whatever film that you are making. And so moving on to the next slide, I kind of wanted to just try to connect this with like a specific study, I guess, a specific avenue to look into, which is like the history of Asian American representation in film. And I really, first of all, wanted to dive into this specifically because, again, I kind of have that background, and I have the lived experience of, being Asian American, and kind of understanding the different nuances within that identity. So I'm just focusing in on this identity in particular. And I wanted to include this quote by Nancy Wan Yuan, who wrote this book called Real Inequality: Hollywood Actors and Racism. She writes that racism, the form of job exclusion and racially stereotyped roles, has defined the Hollywood film industry since its birth in the early 1900s. And so, if we move to the next slide, I think, very important, very easy to recognize how historically the entire existence of Asian Americans it's been demonized, it's been racialized, marginalized, and that's very, very closely tied to the sort of political, social, and economic context of the United States throughout history. Wanting to portray Asian Americans as a certain type of way, in a certain type of light, due to the interests of the United States itself. And if you look at all the policies that have happened, like immigration exclusion laws, sort of not letting Asian Americans venture into certain types of fields, and specifically with film, having all of these very stereotypical roles of Asian Americans, and even like yellow face, which if you're not familiar with, is like when white actors would act as Asians and like wear very offensive kind of yellow toned makeup to act, as Asians. And so yeah, all of this within film is again very connected to the broader political and economic context of the United States. And so that's why, yeah, I think it's important to recognize all of this. And I think more and more recognition has been made in the past few years of just how pervasive this sort of this racism within Hollywood was, and the negative effects that it had towards Asian Americans. And if you can move to the next slide, please. This is just an Anime Wong quote that I really appreciate Anime Wong. I think she was really somebody who challenged all of that I just mentioned. And even though she did herself play some stereotypical roles, that was because those were kind of the only roles that were available to her at the time. And it didn't mean that she wasn't critical of that and trying to challenge that herself. And she wrote that, I was so tired of the parts I had to play. Why is it that this screen Chinese is nearly always the villain of the piece, and so cruel a villain, murderous, treacherous, a snake in the grass? We are not like that. How should we be with a civilization that's so many times older than that of the West? We have our own virtues. We have a rigid code of behavior, of honor. Why do they never show these on the screen? Why should we always scheme, rob, and kill? And so, yeah, I think that really just highlights how at the time it was just very limiting. No kind of freedom for actors to be able to play genuine, like authentic roles. And of course, that was because none of those roles were being written, and there were not like many Asian American writers and directors themselves at all. And so any roles that were created were, of course, in the very stereotypical negative light. So yeah, and if you could move on to the next slide. I think the importance of all of this is really looking at how this contributes to people's perceptions of Asian Americans. If you think about historically, again, like I think it was kind of a cycle because they, wanting to portray Asian Americans in a certain type of light and having these negative images of them, and then that only being further reinforced through film itself and through these films made and these roles created that portrayed them these ways. And obviously if audience members watch that, they would then have these negative kind of connotations and images of this group of people further reinforced within their own mind. And I think this is actually still pretty prevalent and important into the present day. Even though I think a lot of progress has been made in terms of more representation in film and more Asian American actors, writers, directors. I think there's still a lot to be done, and there's still sort of these predominant narratives about Asian Americans that are being reinforced through film. And yeah, if you move to the next slide, there's been studies done on the representation itself, and yeah, like this study from USC found that from 2007 to 2019, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders still accounted for less than 6% of speaking roles and less than 4% of leads and co-leads in Hollywood films. So that just shows that there is still very much a lack in representation. And so if you move to the next slide, this was just me kind of thinking about, how important it is for these different complexities of the Asian American identity to be spotlighted. And I think, again, this is why we need more and more of a push towards having genuine and authentic stories being told from a lot of different communities within the identity itself, because there's so many different subgroups within this broad Asian American identity, and I feel that there's definitely been like more and more East Asian stories being told in recent years, but I do still think that there is a lack in kind of the communities within the identity that have historically not been included as much, such as like Pacific Islanders and Southeast Asians, like refugees from these countries that have been very much like plagued by war and a lot of sort of political aspects to that as well. And there's also just a lot of differences within, such as like immigration and looking at generational differences, the themes of assimilating versus trying to retain your cultural heritage, relations with other minority groups. So yeah, really, there's just such a rich sort of variety of parts of the identity to explore through film, and I think just like a lot of these complexities are still not being shown really through film today. And if you move to the next slide, I just put together a few films that I think have definitely pushed boundaries and helped with having more representation in recent years. But again, just recognizing that within this, there is still nuances and, thinking about what even these films are trying to portray as, like, what is Asian American. And I think specifically with like Crazy Rich Asians as an example, that's, I think, example of, a very limiting sort of notion and narrative of Asian Americans, and definitely not representative of like an entire Asian American community, and kind of almost further reinforcing the ideas of like Asian Americans as all being very wealthy and very well off. And I just think that there's still a lot to be done in terms of showing the full complexity of this identity. So yeah, if you move to the next slide, I think definitely there's many things to be done to be able to reach the point of having more films that reflect all of these complexities. I think we really should be encouraging more and more stories from different communities to be shared, and also implementing structures like within the entertainment industry to make these projects actually be able to be brought into fruition, and finally just spotlighting stories from communities that have been left out of the dominant narrative, and the dominant narrative even within like the Asian American identity itself, right? So spotlighting stories from those communities that have been left out and not seen as like part of even part of the Asian American identity itself. So yeah, and if you move to the next slide, this is just like kind of a note for myself and a recognition that I myself need to learn more as well, because yeah, again, like I feel like I can talk most about Asian America itself because of my own personal relation to it and background with it, but I know that there are so many other communities in the United States, and not only the United States, but the world at large, that have historically not been represented, or if they have, it's not very authentic, like through film. And so, yeah, I think that like there's just so much to be done in terms of trying to challenge that, and trying to create more and more opportunities for these stories to be represented and to be shared with others. And so, yeah, if you move to the next slide, I think kind of just wrapping up here, because so many narratives have been left out throughout history, especially in America. It's very important to bring these stories to light in our present context so that more people can understand the complexities of different communities and their unique experiences. So I really believe that representation matters, not only because it offers deeper level of connection to historically underrepresented audiences, but also because it allows for other viewers to possess a more complete understanding of these communities and how they are situated in our present day context. And so here, there's really kind of these two levels, right? That underrepresented audience themselves feel very touched by these stories that shine light on their experiences. And on a maybe broader level, it also allows others to have a deeper level of understanding of those different from them, from themselves. And so moving to the next slide, this is really kind of like the really broad look at all of this, and expanding beyond just just Asian Americans too. It's really my hope that with more and more stories from diverse perspectives being told, we can better understand one another. We can recognize our common humanity more and more. We can have films that better reflect the lived experiences of working class people, people just doing the best that they can to get by, people who have been pushed to the margins of society. And yeah, really, I think historically, like film definitely still has perpetuated certain narratives about certain people. And I think given our present day situations, our present day context, we as filmmakers, kind of have a responsibility to challenge that and try to change things for the future. And so, yeah, I really love film because it is such a powerful medium, and because it has that power to touch people's hearts and really make people think. If you move to the next slide, this is just a quote from Nadine Labaki, who is a Lebanese filmmaker that I really love. She writes, "Cinema is not just about making people dream, it's about changing things and making people think." And I really love that. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is really that, again, like film is such a powerful way for us to impact people and to try to make people change their thinking in some ways, and critically think. And so if you move to the next slide, this is really just like a wrap up. And I do really think that there are so many possibilities for the future, and the future is very bright, because I think that there are just so many stories that can be told and can be brought to light, and so many dreams to be fulfilled, hearts to touch. And I think with a growing recognition of the importance of creating stories beyond the dominant narrative, that has been, historically has been the main narrative, we can continue to make the changes that we want to see happen, and continue to share more and more authentic stories from people who have historically been left out. And so, yeah, moving to the next slide, which is really just, well, yes, first of all, thank you all so much for being here again. And if you're, in parts of the world where it's so late or so early in the morning, like, thank you so much for, for being here. And if you move to the next slide, this is just kind of a personal plug. If you ever want to talk with me about any of this, like, I would really love to. I love discussing any of this with others, and I also would really love if you have any sort of like resources or just like anything, like any articles or any suggestions for things to watch or read. Please send them my way, because I recognize that I myself still have a lot to learn in terms of all of this, and I'm wanting to continue to become more and more knowledgeable about film, about representation. And so, thank you all so much again, and I would love for you to ask any questions if you have any during this like Q&A session. but yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. We really love your presentation. I myself even learned a few things too. But yeah, thank you very much for your presentation about such an important topic. We're going to now move into the Q&A session of our live stream.
Mhm.
First, we have a question which says, "Hi Rosie, I loved your presentation. What would you say is one of your favorite films with Asian American representation?"
Oh, that's such a good question. I have, gosh, yeah, I have many. Well, so on one of the slides, I included this poster from like The Farewell, and I really do love that movie. I watched it, yeah, when it first came out, and I remember feeling very touched by it because it did remind me of my relationship with my grandmother in China. And so I thought that was a really powerful film. And there's like, yeah, I also really love Minari, which was also in one of the slides. Yeah, just is such a beautiful, touching one. And so I would say, yeah. And of course, Everything Everywhere All at Once. How could I forget that one? Yeah, that one really like, oh God, I cried so much while I watched that movie. Um, it just really like it really touched like yeah really touched my heart, and I think it really touched a lot of like people like me, second generation like Asian Americans. And I think being able to see it do so well and like become so popular, win the Oscars, so many Oscars, like that was really cool to see. And so I would say, yeah, that one. Okay, and maybe that one's like at the top of the list, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that one too.
Yeah.
And next we have a question. We have one, and it says from Mauricio, after the film festival process, what is your next step for your film?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really I don't really know. I think, I'll just say that I'm just looking forward to making the next one. I think, again, like this was really just the first venture into it all, and I learned so much through the process of making it. So I really want to try to like keep learning and using all the things that I learned from making Forget Me Not to just to better inform my next project. And so yeah, I think, with this one, I honestly didn't really even expect any of this to come out of making it. Like at first I didn't even think that I would be posting it online, because I was just like, this is not, it's just gonna be not good enough, like nobody's gonna watch it. But obviously, I'm very glad that it has received a lot of views on YouTube and like a lot of love and support. And so yeah, I guess I'll just like keep trying to share it with others, keep trying to expand its reach, its audience. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have any other other things that I would want to do with the film. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it sounds exciting. Yeah, thank you for that, Rosie. And now we have a question from Francesco. He says, I loved your presentation. As an Italian, I feel you so deeply because you're known all over the world for being quote unquote spaghetti eaters. Haha, that's what he wrote. And he said, anyway, I want to ask, what do you think about stereotypical representation in comedy movies? Do you think
Oh.
it should be maintained or should it be reconsidered?
Hmm. That's a really interesting question. Yeah, no, I do think that it should be reconsidered. I mean, I think, yeah, like the idea of, oh, like this is a funny, funny stereotype, funny, this is how this group of people just always are portrayed. And it's like, yeah, I guess I would have to actually look myself more into like comedy specifically, because that's definitely a area that I yeah, just like don't have too much experience with. But I do think that like there there should be a challenging of the idea that um it's just like really funny to keep reinforcing these certain images and stereotypes of people. Like I think there's so many other ways that you can be comedic and represent people sort of more authentically and more humanly, humanizing them more, rather than just continuing to push these certain stereotypes about them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rosie. Oh, he wrote just now. He said, copy that. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Aaron Reynolds. He says, who are some filmmakers who inspire you?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, I actually wrote down a list of directors that I just really, really love. So I'm just gonna read them because I think these are like truly some amazing people, and I want to keep learning from them, keep watching films by them. So yeah, and I also want to keep kind of expanding my expanding the different parts of the world that I know films from and filmmakers from. And so yeah, a lot of these are like international filmmakers, and I really love international films as well. I think again, it's all part of like this idea of like expanding your perceptions of people and diversifying your knowledge of the world through watching films being made by people different from you and from different walks of life. So yeah, I love like Alfonso Cuarón, Hirokazu Koreeda. My like one his movie Shoplifters is like kind of my all-time favorite movie. Quentin Tarantino, of course, classic. Wong Kar-wai, Greta Gerwig, Damien Chazelle. There's like a Chinese director called Zhang Yimou, and Chloe Zhao as well. And I do want to keep adding to that list as well. But yeah, those are some people that I like just really love their films so much. And I think all of their films, again, like go very much contribute to a sort of broader like common humanity, and yeah, really try to humanize certain groups of people more. And yeah, so sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer to that very simple question, but those are some people I really love and am inspired by.
Yeah, that's great. Now we have a question from Noah. He says, hi, Rosie. Thank you. I too believe that film has great potential to influence how people think about the world. A concern that I have is that not enough people watch the kind of movies that deal with themes like Asian American life to create actual change. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something I've definitely thought about a lot. But I guess I would, maybe I'm just like very idealistic about this all, but I'd like to think that actually kind of the tides are turning, and I think that people are like the general public is actually becoming more and more receptive to these sort of stories. I mean, if you think about like the films that I sort of mentioned before, like The Farewell, Everything Everywhere All at Once, they did very well at box offices, and yeah, like probably more like very unexpected for some people to be able to do that well. But I think it really just shows that like, yeah, like I do think that people actually really are drawn to stories that are kind of more authentic, and like I think there's a lot to be said about like how to create the changes within the industry to kind of be able to like facilitate that more and be able to have actual these films be able to be made in the first place, to have the funding needed, all of that. But yeah, I do think that if the story is genuine, if it's well made, if it really is able to touch people, then I think that people will be very, very drawn to watching it, and like it will prove to be successful, I guess more like commercially. And even if not, like I think that's still important to try to push for it, because at the end of the day, like if is able to touch people, even if not like too vast of an audience, I guess, like that's still a good thing, to be able to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rosie. And now we have a question from Mauricio. They say, besides being stereotyped in American cinema, do you find yourself being portrayed different in Asian cinema as an Asian American? For example, myself as a Chicano, I find myself too American for the Mexicans, but too Mexican for the Americans.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is yeah, definitely something that I have thought about as well. I think it's again like that space of in between, you're like not fully American enough to be considered American, but you're also not like yeah, like for me, like Chinese enough to fit in like truly into China. And I guess yeah, like I from what I've watched of Chinese cinema, well, actually, yeah, I don't know. Maybe in recent years there have been movies made that like touch on like Chinese Americans rather than Chinese people themselves living in China. But like, yeah, I personally have not watched any movies coming from China that have. So I'm not sure if it's just like a thing that yeah they don't or yeah maybe I am just not aware of any that have been made. Um, but I think that's really interesting avenue to explore for sure. And I think like yeah, like thinking about myself, obviously like I wouldn't be able to necessarily go to China and like uh make a film about, the experience of Chinese Americans back in America. But I think perhaps that is another avenue to explore for those like your the like yourself said, if you're living like in Mexico, I guess, to try to explore that, and to have maybe like friends, yeah, like explore that as well. I think it's definitely something that is interesting to look into. But yeah, just me myself, I don't have much experience with it, because I haven't watched any films from China that have been made about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one more question here with the time that we have. It's from Eve. She says, Rosie, do you think you can make impactful films on a low budget?
Well, yes, I do think so. I mean, like for just speaking on the personal experience of with Forget Me Not, like the budget was definitely very, very, very low. And we kind of just managed with it. And I'm gonna be very real, like I have so much to learn in terms of uh like managing budgets and how to actually accumulate funding to be able to make films in the first place. Like that's an avenue that I definitely don't have much experience in at all. But I do think that like I always like to say that as long as like you have a very thought out and very yeah, just like a strong story, that's really the foundation for the film, right? So if you have that foundation down, if you have that story, I think the rest of it, like actually putting it together and kind of the technical aspects of the film are really just to enhance that story. And so that's why I think like we don't necessarily need like super fancy equipment and like super high tech stuff to be able to make something that still touches people. And yeah, I think just based off my experience with Forget Me Not, like that's really what I found, is that we didn't need all of this sort of fancy like outside extra stuff, but we just needed the bare bones foundation to be able to tell that story. And I think because of that, yeah, sort of the story like shines enough on itself, I guess. Yeah, so I would like to think that you don't need like a super big budget to be able to still make something that is impactful towards people. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rosie. And that's also like why we have the Student World Impact Film Festivals to help student filmmakers, to have no submission fees. So it's all
Yeah.
like part of helping students and helping people, even on a low budget, like you
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think to end off, we have a great comment here from Francesco.
Mhm.
He says, "Thank you, Rosie, and thank you, Mark, for giving us the opportunity to listen to these stories that couldn't be shared if there wasn't events like this. You are great." So I think that's a wonderful comment to end off. Thank you very much, Francesco. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so that concludes our speaker session today with Rosie Zhou from Columbia University. We're very excited to have you here today. It was wonderful to speak with you and to have your presentation. It was extremely insightful and inspirational. And thank you very much for being with us here at the Student World Impact Film Festival here at 2023.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Mark, for organizing and hosting.